All right, nice to see everyone. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock. Welcome, Akua. I think this is your first in-person meeting. Nice to have you here with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
On our consent agenda, we have prior minutes. We have a number of policy reads, as well as a few policies to be removed. Any discussion?
Do you think we could start with introductions?
Oh,
first?
yeah, sure, absolutely.
I'll start.
Yeah.
Then go to superintendent. Go for it.
Gabrielle.
Hold on, you're gonna hear what roles
And
are.
maybe what your role is too.
In person.
I have to think about it because it takes me a minute to go through it every single time. I'm the interim co-director of curriculum and instruction as well as the FBA coordinator.
Say that 5 times fast.
I know, that's why I always stop.
I'm the facilities director on Berkeley Board.
Hi, I'm Courtney Fletcher. I'm that person.
Michelle Burge, Director of Student Services.
This is Spanish.
Dawn Reed, Director of Food Service. Kevin Moore, Director of the Leaps After School Summer Programs.
Dominic Rocha, Director of Technology.
Board member.
Alternate board member.
Mary Dennis.
I'm Jamie McAllister, Human Resources.
Yes, and
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Catherine Fire, board member. Nice to meet you all, Akua Smith, board member as well. Glad to be here.
Great, nice to have you. Great, so, any discussion, questions about the consent agenda, prior minutes, or those policies? Okay, and I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda. Oh, and I guess we don't have to do that by roll, because we're all here in the room, that rarely happens. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Great.
The only one we missed, Mary, is, Michelle
Oh my
Irish.
goodness, of course, so sorry. Michelle Irish, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle Irish. I'm the Director for the Advancement of Educational Equity, Franklin Northeast.
And another director is coming up.
Hi Leah, welcome. Nice to see you. Do you want to introduce yourself? We have a new board member here today.
Hi, I'm Leah Blitzos. I'm the co-director of instruction and learning alongside Gab Lumber this year.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, Lynn, any reason to reprioritize the flow of the meeting?
I don't think so, I think we're good.
Okay, I know we have an executive session under
We could do
yours,
that
so
at
I
the
think,
very end.
I was thinking we would do that at the very end and let all the directors go.
Makes sense.
Okay, all right, so Courtney, it doesn't look like we have anyone virtually who's joining us for public comment. No one else in the room. So, that brings us to our spotlight tonight, which is, Leah and Gab. So I'll turn it over to you all.
Gab, do you want, Leah, do you want to share your slideshow or do you want me to?
It'd probably be easiest for you, Courtney.
On it.
We're gonna be super timely, so somebody should time us, because I think we're gonna win.
I gave them 10 minutes. See how they do.
So, we're gonna do a spotlight on what we've been doing with professional learning this year. Personalized it a bit. And can you go to the next slide? One tool we've been using that's used in the classroom quite a bit is choice boards. So we've been using, we have a choice board, sorry, I'm supposed to do what are choice boards. Leah's on the next one. So choice boards are a way to organize learning options so that kids and all learners have choices, but within certain parameters. So it's a way to sort of structure choice and still give options. This is our choice board. Oh, you have to do this slide. One more meeting? Yeah, there it is. Not loading. No, that one. It's not that one. Yeah, that one. So this is our choice board that's developed around the board goals, and underneath each of the board goals, there's options for different types of learning experiences. At the first in-service, we just did like asynchronous ones where people could choose, they click on it, and there's a course or a reading, or there were lots of different types of options that people could choose from. And then in the second in-service, we did also live options. So there were choices for in-person events. And I think the next one's you, Leah.
So we wanted to kind of highlight some of the benefits. Oh, I'm getting feedback, I'm sorry if I'm not clear. Some of the benefits is that it becomes highly personalized for the staff. So much like in the classroom, it's program goals, these are the objectives that we have, but we have flexible means to get there. And so this was kind of the breakout of looking at all the individually selected choices that our staff went through. So out of the 200 different responses, this is all broken into tiny little pieces because everybody was able to personalize the different path that they took that afternoon. That brought us kind of all threaded back to what the ultimate outcome was kind of reaching and achieving those goals. Courtney, if you want to go to the next slide. So along with the choice options, we embedded different places within the building that they could choose to work. So they had the option of finding that they work best individually and focused on their own task, or they could work with people that also chose made a choice in an area that was similar to them. So if it was an SEL focus or student-centered learning or academic proficiency, or they could be with a team. If they had a shared outcome with other people, they could work together as a team. Or they also attend live sessions. So this is kind of helping us to be where people are most leaning towards. And giving them a lot of different universal kind of options for how they're going about it. And you can go to the next slide. And so part of our exit ticket is to make sure that it's meaningful and productive. And so in the exit ticket, when 200 staff were asked on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree, that they felt that the time was productive, focused, and beneficial. We had some really positive outcomes. So we wanted to take that moment to make it a great spot in where we are at this point. I think there might be, okay. And then just in case you're curious about it, you'll have access to the slideshow. And there are some choice words that are showing up in other places. One of interest was that even the New York Times is using choice boards now, and they're geared towards students. So if you're curious to know more about different choice board options, these are just a few examples that you could check out.
Item was 446, that was one of the things that has shifted from the first section to the second section, and will shift again in January when we have everybody back, is also offering some live options in that second in-service, and I think that was also something that was really positively received. So they had both asynchronous and synchronous learning opportunities, but they know who they are as a learner, and that's the whole point of doing something like this, is that everybody can be wherever they are on the path, and they can choose what's their next just right learning opportunities. I appreciate Leah and Kat putting this together so you can get a little sense of what professional learning has begun to look like in FNESU. Thank you both. I'll put the blue ribbon in your mailbox tomorrow.
Thank you both. So that brings us to Morgan with our budget discussion.
Sounds good, and I will share my screen, I think, initially.
You're sharing.
And Morgan, do you have a copy that you can email us for looking at, since the screen's so far away?
You're gonna get some paper copies.
Okay.
So this is the slideshow that I've walked you through in your local meetings as well. So in terms of the schedule for this board, we are at November 15th. Our next meeting is December 20th, and that's normally when we like to finalize this budget, because finalizing this budget finalizes the assessments that go into your two local budgets. We will be getting the tax commissioner's yield proposal on December 1st, which is just before your two next local meetings. We will get the first official student count on December 15th. One of the changes in Act 127 sort of allows us to calculate that in advance and make a prediction with a lot more accuracy. So when I bring you budgets in December, we will actually have those two numbers and be able to project out pretty accurately what the tax rate is, or at least what the tax rate is that you'll be warning in your budgets. If we decide that we can't finalize by December 20th, we'll look to have an early January meeting, probably before MMV meets in January. These are the three board goals that this board has set. We've added some at the local levels, but not so much here in the past. Just want to keep bringing your attention back to these as we talk about some of the changes in the budget. This is the enrollment past history and projections based on a district level rather than the school level that you've seen. So you see that right now there's been a lot up and down in the last 5 years. 2020 was the first COVID drop. And then you'll see that the projections at least can see both of those districts flattening out. And as you've seen in your local board meetings, while at a district level, they're fairly stable. Both sides have seen some more market swings on a school-by-school basis. Some of the additional considerations that are going into this budget process, another year when we're still seeing high social emotional needs and a mental health agency and mental health partners who are not able to keep up with that. The last round of COVID funding expires in FY25. It'll be actually next September. We have 14 people currently in the budget, or at least parts of 14 people in the current budget that we need to move out of our PESR. There are 3 family engagement coordinators, the director for the advancement of educational equity, 3 instructional coaches, a total of 5 flexible pathways staff, an SEL coordinator, and then a piece of the Richford Elementary School assistant principal. Again, at some of your local meetings, we've already had discussions about these positions in part, moving to those local budgets, and we'll be talking tonight about some proposals on where to house the rest of those staff. As I mentioned, health insurance premiums are up 16.4%. Dental insurance is going up as well, although it's a much smaller piece of the pie and it's a much smaller increase. I think our rates are 4% this year. With the change in special ed funding through Act 173, We are in 4 years of seeing an increase to our census block grant. So for special ed revenue, we will see an additional 300,000 give or take coming into the budget this year, and we're expecting to have that in FY26 and FY27. And then as we've talked about in the past, and I'm gonna go over again on the next slide, the changes brought about by Act 127 are giving more taxing capacity to local districts. So for our 2 districts, they are seeing a larger pupil count, and so with the same tax rate, they're gonna be able to raise more money to support those kids.
Morgan, can you just clarify, you said flexible pathways was 5 FTE, but you have 4.5, is that SEL coordinator, the other
It's actually,
0.5?
it's 5 humans, but 4.5 FTE. Because
Okay.
we had already pulled half of Gabby out of there.
Okay, and so all of these positions now need to be, that have been priorly funded through the ARP ESSER now need to be pulled into our regular.
To
Budget.
a budget somewhere if you want to keep them. And so the family engagement coordinators have, we've already proposed moving those into local budgets, and both boards have seen that and seem supportive of it. The Richford AP was for Richford budget, and so it's these 4 categories in the middle that we're going to be talking about tonight. And so another run through on Act 127, we've been doing a number of presentations around the state on this, and so I keep tweaking the presentation that I'm giving you. And to go into some of the background of the Act, we have a constitutional requirement in Vermont for equal access to funding for all kids. And the way that we do that in the state is that those pupil weights will adjust student counts so that students who are more expensive to educate, for lack of a better word, the districts with those kids have a better ability to raise that money. So the more kids you have, the lower your tax rate is, and what Act 127 does is change the weighting, so kids in certain categories will count more for you and drive up that student count. The formula hasn't really changed since Act 60, but when Act 60 was passed, those weights were not really based on any evidence. They knew that certain kids, or they felt they knew that certain kids cost more to educate than others, and they came up with a formula to use, but there's really no research behind that. And so one of the big drivers behind Act 127 was a realization that in a few of those cases, those weights were insufficient for the cost of those kids. So while the weighting factors have changed, the concept is the same. It's just how we raise money or how we adjust the tax rate for districts that have students that are costlier to educate. The districts who are advantaged, like NMV and like ER, should be able to raise more money for the same tax rate, and so better support those students. And the law is pretty clear that the intent is not to just take those extra kids and drive their tax rate down, which is a possibility. Disadvantaged districts, so districts that are going to see fewer kids overall or fewer kids in relationship to other towns, they've got a 5-year phase-in, and that's in place to allow them some time to adjust their budgets and bring their spending in line, or if they're not going to adjust their budgets, educate their community why their tax rate is going to be climbing so significantly. So for the staffing changes that we are going to discuss, the first one is around EL, or emerging multilingual learners. As was discussed at the last SE meeting, we're proposing an additional person, so we would bring that up to 2 teachers in that department. For what's commonly referred to as central office, proposing moving 3.2 FTE of the flexible pathway teachers from ESSER into the general fund budget. The other 0.8 of the 4 teachers there, we are proposing moving into the Enosburg Richard budget, and we previewed that with them last night. We have the 3 instructional coaches, which would move into either the general fund or possibly one of them could be pushed off into Title II, which is one of the federal streams of money that we get. Normally, we're not allowed to put something that already exists into any of the title money, because ESSER's federally funded, we're allowed to move from one federal pot to another. The SEL coordinator, who's currently half-time, would stay half-time, and that person would be moved into either the general fund or into Title IV, another one of those federal streams. And we are showing it in your general fund budget tonight, but shortly before the meeting, I got word from our CFP project director that we're confident that Title IV would be a good match programmatically for them, and so that position could be approved under that funding stream. Moving Michelle Irish's position from ESSER into the general fund budget, and then proposing keeping 2 positions for the Director of Instruction and Learning. These pieces largely already exist in your budget. We had 0.7 of Jody in your local budget, 0.5 of Leah in your local budget, 0.5 of Leah in your special ed budget, which we just move over. And then there are some pieces and parts in the CFP grants that we would pull into the general funds to cover those 2 people. And then there's some smaller changes in terms of how some existing staff are funded. So we might be moving people between special ed and regular ed based on what their job duties are. But in terms of new humans in this budget, so far it's only the 1 EML teacher up above.
Can I jump in on this? So one of the things when we're talking about budget is that we have to consider is, which budget does it make the most sense for certain positions to come out of? So the emerging multilingual teachers is a perfect example. So we never know where those students are gonna show up in terms of our schools. And we at the central office have the elevation to see like what's the need and how does it compare between schools across the organization. So we can make decisions from this level in terms of how to deploy that resource out into schools. So there was a conversation that could be had tonight about thinking about those emerging multilingual positions and having them be defined as, maybe one is in the ER budget and one is in the NMV budget. At the same time, I would want us to have an understanding that we still need that flexibility from our level to be able to say all of the students who need emerging multilingual services are in the ER system this year. So we're gonna agree that we'll be able to deploy those resources the way we need to deploy them. I think as you're looking at this and you're looking at the rest of the budget tonight, I think that the work that we do here is not the same as the work that was done in a central office 20 years ago. So many of the functions have been centralized over time, so you'll see that, you don't have transportation in your local budgets anymore, that's all centralized through the central office. We have food services that we've centralized and facilities and early childhood education. And so much of that is driven by kind of the mandates from above in some cases, but then the other piece of it is driven by workforce. So for instructional coaches, by way of example, I think that few people would dispute that it is pretty effective to be able to have someone who is very skilled coaching brand new teachers as they enter the profession. And giving people that opportunity is really essential for setting them up for success in this field. The reality of the staffing shortages is that if principals went out and tried to do that all on their own, we'd be looking for people that would be working in 9 different buildings. And the reality is some people would be able to hire, some people would not be able to hire. So some schools would be able to support their teachers and some schools would not. So as we think about these functions within the budget, that's something that we have to keep in mind in terms of kind of how all the pieces come together. Where does it make sense that certain positions live in the local districts that are really school-specific functions? And where does it make more sense for us to be able to look at it at a higher level and say, okay, if we have 3 instructional coaches that support all 9 of our schools, this year, the majority of this person's time might be at school X because this school has 10 new teachers. They might not be spending any time in school Y because there are no new teachers in school Y. And being able to do that at the organizational level is much more effective because we can be data-driven and we can be looking at overall need. So that's part of the reason why you see over time some of the positions that have historically been school level, all the factors that Morgan talked about earlier on about considerations, that's also one of those factors is the decentralizing of functions. Vern is a good example too, and then I promise I'll be quiet. When I was a building principal, those of you who don't know, I was a principal for 11 years, and when I left that role, Morgan knows he was my business manager for part of that time. I knew an awful lot about a lot of things that had nothing to do with educating students. I knew how to restart the water system. I knew just enough about boilers to be dangerous, right? There were a lot of things that I had to know how to do. I knew how to run the little floor Zamboni thing because sometimes the custodian would be out and someone would have to do that. We have Vern now who is able to access grant opportunities for our schools and get things done. And that's one of the things when we're looking at this level. This board is really important because you've got a vantage point that the local district boards don't have, where you can see the entirety of the picture and how looking at a function like Vern's role or Heather's role as someone who really is overseeing all of the after-school programs can look at all of the parts and make the best decision about how our resources are used. So as we're having these conversations tonight, I just wanted to point that out because there are things that we have to consider based on where we're choosing to fund certain positions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, two quick things I would add to that. Jamie may be the only person really with the long enough history to remember a time when I was on the board where there was a lot of hostility from individual boards towards the supervisory union. And so the supervisory union staff put a lot of effort into pushing as many costs into the local budget as possible. We've really backed away from that in large part because the SU board is very different now, the local boards are very different now and supportive of that. And so when Dominic brings me an invoice for $1,000, in the past, my predecessor might say, well, we're gonna charge $100 to this school, $100 to this school, $100 to this school, and we're gonna send out 6 separate checks to the vendor. And we're not saying, okay, if we're making every school have this and have access to it, we're gonna pull that into our budget and cover it. So there's some long history there. And then also long history with the states, as Linda tipped, they've been pushing things up to the supervisory union level for districts that are still in that structure. And so when I look at the 2 EML teaching positions, logically I could make an argument and say, okay, we'll put one in an MBA and we'll put one in Pittsburgh Richford. I also know that there's a lot of interest in this topic at the state, and for your special educators, if we had the ability to, we could still part those out because we kind of don't move them during the year. Somebody's starting in Bakersfield, they're usually ending in Bakersfield. But the state has stepped back and said, no, we're not going to allow you to do that anymore. We're going to make you do it at the supervisory union level because we want to, I think it's because we want to ensure that there's equity across those districts, which there hasn't been in the past.
Morgan, on the insurance premiums, this is a really high number for an increase, and I feel like last year was really high too. Is that typical year to year? Like over 10%, over 15%?
That has been the new normal, I would say. And we have a very generous health plan. And so I don't have the numbers exact, and Jamie can correct me, but if I spend $10,000 in healthcare, I am maybe spending $300 out of pocket after premiums, and that does come out of paychecks, but it's really so much of the benefit is paid by the plan that those increases are driving up. And I know there are, new kind of boutique drugs that are out there that are getting a lot of traction, and when I go to my meetings, they talk about how those impacts are already seen in the plan. So,
And what percentage do employees pay of the premiums?
depends on the employee, but generally it's an 80-20 split, the employer paying.
We have no control over the healthcare. It's a statewide healthcare agreement. And they just, all schools in Vermont offer the exact same insurance to employees.
And that is bargained at the state. ACUA is now an alternate on the board that does the bargaining for the employer side, and the deck has not stacked in your favor, the way that the law is written. So I would imagine that double-digit increases are gonna be there for the foreseeable future.
And it's good though that everyone's using the same, because that would concern me more if it were different, because that just makes different schools and districts more competitive. One more thing to make them work.
And when I was doing this for 5 districts, that was definitely in play in salary negotiations when they were separate. If you could get a little bit of an advantage, and back then health insurance was cheap as well, so it's kind of easy to give a few percentage points.
And is the 80-20 split also statewide?
It's negotiated, yeah,
Okay.
so that could change, but that's been pretty stable.
Back in those days, people used to compete for employees within the supervisory union. So we'd have employees jump from one of our schools to another school because salaries and benefits were not the same.
And frequently we do it with cash in lieu, so you just pay another $2,000 in cash in lieu, and you can grab people that way. So to push on, in food service, Dawn is proposing about a half an FTE drop year over year. She's got several people who are not full-time, so there's some shifts in there, but she feels like that is covered with the amount of folks she's got. In special ed, things are a little more complicated, and they are likely to change the most between this meeting and your next meeting. So the document that I'm about to share with you is going to show an overall decrease of just over 1 FTE, and that's including both the general fund and the grants budget. And you won't see the grants budget here, but we have most of the paraeducator staff that are in the alternative programs. We have them coming out of the IDB grant, and then we have, I think, all of your early ed, special ed teachers coming out of an early ed, special ed grant. So you won't see them on here, but I wanted to kind of paint the whole picture. So overall, that change, the major changes are the addition of 1 FTE, the reduction of the speech language pathologist, the addition of a therapeutic social worker, removing the half-time district evaluator position as special ed, and that's the one that we had in the past. We're adding a second OT, and that person is being trained up by the current one, so that number may drift down in future years again. We've got the addition of 4 BTs who are those highly trained paraeducators, and this is one where I think I may have missed one, and we may add one before your next meeting. But that is offset by the reduction of 5 1/4 contracted workers. So these are mostly the NCSS CAT and autism workers. So that sort of, to me, makes sense that we're swapping them out for our own people.
Morgan, just to back up to clarify around the contracted workers, do we have some of those who exist in the regular district budgets as well, correct?
And we still have some in this budget. It's just we're coming down from 9 or 10 or whatever we had budgeted last year.
Okay,
It would only be in the local district budget if they were attached to a student, not.
That's my question.
Correct.
If someone requires a one-on-one contracted NC assessed worker at one of the NMB schools, that person is in the NMB budget.
Only if they're not in special education.
Okay,
Once they're identified as special ed, that cost moves to the SU budget. So you
Okay.
can see some switching, but there are some that are not meeting those gates that still need that higher level of support. And in those cases, they are in your local budget.
Yeah.
We will use these more in your local budget discussions with your voters in here, but I'd like to give this information to you as well. So on this budget, this is what we buy, almost 3/4 of what we do is salaries and benefits. You will see in that other services section, that big green wedge, a pretty significant proportion of that is your transportation contract, which is also humans, but they're not around. And then in that blue wedge, the supplies utilities, a big chunk of that is the food cost for the food programs. So nothing too different than what we talked about at the local level. And then this is the same, but split out in terms of what we do. So the red band is our services that are going directly to students. The blue band is the food service program, and then the green band is either supporting students or supporting adults to be better at supporting students, and then the administration and transportation piece. In this chart, we showed this to Enosburg last night. I don't think we've seen it at NMV yet. But this is the grid of statewide ed spending per pupil. This is the spending amount for the budgets that were approved this year, but this is divided by that new pupil weight. So this is giving you something a little more accurate for what we will be seeing going forward. And you'll see that the Franklin County average comes in about 2/5 the way up. Statewide average is right about halfway up. We've got a low of just over 8,000 and a high of almost 18,000 across the state in terms of what they're paying per pupil. The red lines that are on here, and I will send the slide deck out to you afterwards as well. The red lines are the other districts in Franklin County, and then NMV is this blue line towards the bottom. Enosburg Richford is the blue line right above that. And so I'm gonna pass some packets around and just make sure for those each day. For anyone who's here and not a board member, I did send it out by email, so you should have a copy in your email if you want it. And then, yeah, why don't we start showing that? Is what? I think that's right, because they are copies of them. So this is the kind of highest level of the budget that you'll see. So if you look, the FY25 proposed column is the one that we are discussing now. The FY23 actual is probably pretty close. We have not seen the first draft of the audit yet, so I will change that as needed if they've come up with any changes. And then eventually I will get the FY24, the first half of the year in there. That was something that we had a local voter, in one of the local district budgets, And so we brought that over to all of them. For the SU board and the SU budget process, it's maybe not as relevant because we didn't have the budget finalized before we know how much we spent through December 31st. So going through those categories, they're gonna match up to those pie charts that we looked at, and they will match up to the staffing list as we walk through that. The direct instruction line at 497 is where your EML teachers are. And it would also be where your FPA teachers are if they're running FNESU. And so that's why you're seeing a pretty significant increase there. We had only one EML teacher proposed in the FY24 budget. So big increase, certainly as a percentage, not as much dollar amount as some other lines because it's starting from a small spot. The next line is part of the special education budget. This is special education direct instruction. So this is where your special ed teachers are, some of your VCBA work, your behavior technicians would be in there as well, in addition to any outstanding out-of-district tuition or payments that we are feeling we're gonna need to make, or at least need to budget for. So you see a pretty significant decrease on this line. I haven't dug into it exactly, but it makes sense given that we're pulling so many kids back from outside placements, and those outside placements are, 60, 80, 100,000 a whack. So that number does feel right to me. The next section, the support services, was that green section on the pie chart. Student support is primarily your psychologists, SLPs, your OT and your PT, and then it would also be that SEL coordinator position I think is going to come in here. So you do see an increase there. It is mostly special ed costs. But not as big as some of the other lines. Instructional support, the 1.2 million, there is some PCBA time in there as well. It's also a little piece of Mary Ellis. The two directors of instruction and learning would be in there. And then your 3 coaches would also be in that line. So that's Leslie Rainville, Amber Bernadette, and Marty Bellinger. And general administration is kind of what we think of as this office. So Lynn, Courtney, Doreen is in there. Doreen is somebody who's going to see more time in that because we've pulled her completely out of special ed, just to more accurately reflect how her time is spent. School administration, we have in this, it's largely salaries for Melissa Wood, Michelle DeBerge, Stacy Kelboden, and Robin Gagne, and then there's some administrative costs in there as well, primarily to support the special ed and the early ed programs. Central services is kind of all the boring stuff. It's Franny and Sonia in there, Jamie is in there, that third to be hired position is in there, and then Dominic and Thomas Wagner, as well as all the technology stuff that we buy. So there's, we'll get into the detail, you'll see there's a pretty significant software line in there, as there always is. Buildings and grounds is burn, rent, and upkeep for this place, and then rent and upkeep for the alternative program space that we're leasing across the street. And then lastly in this category is transportation. This is largely the transportation contract with Terracell. It would also include any remaining transportation amounts that we're budgeting for out-of-district placements. This is a line that really should have gone up significantly more because you'll recall that when we set the budget last year, we didn't have the Terracell contract and the Terracell bid in hand yet. So we that bid came in higher than we budgeted. So this year it's even higher still, but that increase is offset by bringing a lot of those kids who were in out-of-district placements back in-house.
So just to clarify again, like the large increases that we're seeing are mostly due to the positions that are coming out of ESSER?
Yes, so the positions, the 16% health insurance is obviously a big hit because our budget is so much tied to people. Some of the other benefits changes that I think are significant are that in the last round of support staff negotiations, you offer them dental insurance. So we had a lot of people come on to dental insurance who hadn't had that ability before, and so we're seeing, when we get into the lines, you'll see some big increases there. And then in food service, the next line, we are predicting some pretty big increases in food costs, certainly budget to budget. And over the next month on, they're gonna sharpen our pencils on that and see if we've, maybe overshot, but we know that the food costs and delivery costs have gone up pretty significantly.
But like the increase, like an instructional support,
Yeah, that is primarily salaries, so that's primarily gonna be the addition of 3 new people. So food service, 2.2 million again, a lot of that is food costs, and dental insurance, as I mentioned. Staffing is relatively stable since we are cutting a half-time position of that budget. And so that brings the graph that's in front of you up to 12.5 million. The revenue section is still very soft. We have some numbers that haven't dropped yet. But we do know that the census block grant is increasing, which is good. We are expecting more food service revenue, which is mostly in that federal revenue category. We've got some special ed grant numbers that haven't dropped yet, and so that may allow us to move more of the special ed staff into those. And then as we further tweak the budget and further tweak those revenue assessments, we'll be able to hone in on what the actual assessment is to the towns, and that's at the moment it's that $6.2 million line, although I anticipate that will be down for your next draft. Two other sections that I just want to touch on briefly on this sheet, and then we'll get into the details, and I can send you details on these if you want. The next section in there, the local 21st century expenses, are how we capture the costs here that we build into your local budgets. So in both districts, you see a single line item somewhere in there that is kind of an assessment to support the after-school program. This is where we kind of build in the costs and we figure out what is going to go into that so we can figure out that split. There is a big increase to this section this year. I believe Heather may have talked about that last month. That was the one that I was in only briefly on. So this is capturing those costs. When you vote on a budget, you will vote on these expense amounts, but this is sort of an in and out account because whatever we spend in this category is going to be picked up by the local districts. And then similarly, the build back expenses, these are primarily for staff who are split. They're maybe paid half out of federal grants, but the principals want to keep the other half in their schools. And so we pay them as an SU employee out of here. We take half their salary and put it in the grant, and we take half the salary and we send it out to the district. So this is again an in and out, and you will have already seen these in the staff list on your budgets. They'll come in there as a bill back. So Richford High School has a number of staff that are split, and Berkshire Elementary has someone who's been paid out of the SU because they had an early ed special ed endorsement in the state FNESU, special ed to the SU. And then a couple of other people who in the past have been paid out of a grant, who are now fully local, but it's a process to move them from one employer to another, because we have to split them over a year. And so we've just left them in this budget and paid them out of this budget, and then some will go back to the district. So how am I doing on my 4.5 minutes? So in your packet in front of you, after the scary page with all the red and green lines, you will see a section for budgeted FTEs. And this will just give you the detail for the staffing that we walked through on the spreadsheet, or on the slideshow. So that first page is for the EML division department. You see the current teacher there and the to be hired person. The next section, the next 4 pages, largely the folks at the central office. And so if you're tying it back to the one pager, it's really the folks who are coming in under instructional support and general administration for the most part. The next section, the largest one is special ed. Again, this is an incomplete picture that it's only giving the people that we are tracking in the general fund. There will be about 20 behavior technicians that are tucked away in the grants, and then the 3 early ed special ed teaching positions that are tucked into an early ed grant. And then the last page, the last section, is the food service budget, so Don's folks. And I will tell you that the system that we use needs to tie budgeted positions to actual humans with names. So you will see cases where, under Lynn's part, you've accepted a resignation from someone, or you've hired somebody who doesn't show up and they're still showing here as a TBH. We really only need to make sure we have enough people, so we're tracking. If we know that person X is announced that they're going to retire next year, we're just going to leave the name in there. Or if somebody's changed over the last 2 weeks, we're not necessarily going to change their name on the staff list. So on that, I don't think there's anything that I need to tip you to. As I said, I will send the slides out, and so you can kind of look at which positions are new or moving. And then the thicker packet that you have in front of you is the gruesome line-by-line detail into those big numbers on that name sheet. So again, it tracks roughly with how expenses are appearing on that one pager and how we just walked through in terms of staffing. In that you've got the one page for the EML program first. Then you've got a group of pages for the sort of general fund, the central office-y folks. So 8 pages of that. We have a big section for special ed. And then the food service budget comes in at the end. And one thing that I want to tip you to on special ed, that we are doing this differently this year, and so it's going to look a little different. If you look on, say, the page that says 2 of 22, you will see that we are looking at, in that first column, this is Bakersfield School. So we're now tracking the special educators and the BTs and the BCBAs and the school psychs and the SLPs by school. And so just trying to keep tabs on where those people are. We're finding that with the ESSER money and with some of the other grants and just increasing federal requirements, we're being required to track people to that level of detail in a way that we haven't in the past. So we're trying to do that in the budget. But if you look at this section, it'll look like we didn't budget anything for them in FY24, and that we have a bunch of stuff in there for FY '25. And that's just because in FY '24, we didn't split them out by school. We just had them in one big lump sum, and Michelle knew where her people were going, and we in the business office didn't care that much as long as they were getting paid.
Morgan, can you clarify for me what the difference is? The columns, one says variance and one says variance percentage.
Yeah, so you'll need to find a page that has stuff on both. The variance is just a dollar-to-dollar change from one budget to the next, and then the variance percentage puts that into a percentage amount.
Right, and so what's confusing is like, I mean, some of these, you know, there's just such a large spread, so what accounts where we might see something like line 5234 on page 5 of 8. We have a percentage of 72.39%, I'm assuming that's an increase?
That would be an increase, yeah. So page 5 of 8.
I mean, that's just one of them, there's just such a, like, it just is, you know,
Yeah.
such a spread in these percentage increases, so it just is, I'm curious what's driving these big differences.
Sure, and so I would say you wanna look at these, you wanna look at both of those variance columns. So I think in general, what you're gonna see is that it's salaries and benefits, because that's what's increasing in this budget. In terms of where you're gonna see the biggest impact. You know, certainly look at the variance, the percentages there. If it's 50% on a line item that's less than $100, I wouldn't worry about it. That could be just how we're calculating things better. So you really wanna look at sections where there's a big dollar move. So on that page, you can see that second line, the clerical line, that variance is $43,000. That's not that Courtney's getting a $43,000 raise, that's that we have raises and we're bringing people, Doreen in this case is coming in for the special ed budget. So
Okay.
there's multiple things.
Right, I mean, I figured that wasn't just one person representing that 53, not that I don't think you're worth every penny, Courtney. Okay.
And so, you know, where you see health insurance lines that are up above a 16% increase, it's likely that that's either additional staff or staff have changed the health insurance plan they're on. They got married or they moved to a family plan or what have you.
And remind me with the dental, are we doing 100% of that? Because that is separate and distinct from health benefits negotiated statewide.
It's 100% of a single plan.
Oh, right, that's right. You said it's possible that food service, like you've padded it out because of the dramatic increases in food costs, but it's possible that it may be, when you drill down a little bit.
Yeah, and for all these, there's some math or some formula behind figuring out, okay, what do we think the cost is gonna be, and then you're gonna print it out, we're like, oh, that looks a lot bigger than we would have expected, and so we'll go back in and drill in on that. And I don't anticipate any of the individual salaries will change in the next month. I don't see Lynn settling any contracts. We're not gonna be anywhere with support staff union negotiations before this is finalized. So I've got some money in there, which I hope is enough for the support staff. I, for the most part, just brought over what the teacher increase is for folks around this table, and obviously did special ed teachers and folks that we know have something set. But those numbers, aside from the teachers, those numbers are all subject to change. And then similar to how we've been budgeting recently in the local districts. We do gather information by December 1st around who's anticipating making a call movement. I don't tend to game that so much in here because I know historically we've had a pretty high turnover rate. And so, for every person that says they're gonna be taking a class or they're gonna be, moving to the master's column, we probably have somebody that's gonna be leaving that's at the top of the salary schedule and that will be backfilling and it's simply lower, so. And obviously, we don't expect you to digest these 50 pages at one sitting, and so certainly if there are questions on the detailed budget line items, I'm happy to meet offline individually or shoot an email. We'll give a call. But this would be a great opportunity to sort of discuss the conversation that Lynn set up at the beginning around, the appropriate level for some of these services, and if we want them here, if we want them at the local board level, local budget level, as well as commitment to those programs. We can go back and outside of the food line item, where we may find some significant savings, we can certainly go through and shave some things down, but as you know, we're working on these locally. We want to move the budgets in a big way, either raising more money or changing staffing.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Lynn about the positions that are best kept at the SU level as opposed to the local budgets in order to then utilize those folks where they're needed, and some of that is really hard to predict, and I'm sure that over the course of a year it changes too, because we constantly have kids moving out of, between district schools or between SU schools. So that level of flexibility makes a lot of sense with those, a lot of those positions, like the English language teachers and, so, it doesn't seem to me that there's a lot that would be better, in the local budgets. I feel like this is the positions.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about this earlier today, specifically with the EML teachers, and it's not only the kids moving, but it's also just the variation in needs between kids. And so we could have 10 EL kids getting a certain amount of support from the state and needing some staffing to support them. ER could have 10 EL kids, but the 10 in ER might all be high school kids who are coming from families that don't speak any English and are brand new to the country, whereas the 10 in NNV could all be kindergarten kids who are in bilingual homes and really, don't have that same level of need. And so having the ability to move folks around, I think, is key to addressing that, even if the numbers on their face would look even from district to district.
And remind me, in the teachers for the STEPS program and the flexible pathways, they are embedded in the SU budget as well, correct?
We've embedded most of that in this. We've taken a look at what was the work the teachers was doing, and it makes more sense for 80% of one of those positions to move into the ER budget, so we proposed that at last night's ER meeting. So for the most part, the rest of it is embedded in here.
Okay. And in some ways, it's always a best case scenario that we'll be able to even find the people to fill all of these positions.
Although the reality that we have here just say, I'll probably jinx us. We have a very different reality this year than some of the schools across the state, so we're in a position where we're being advantaged by the weights. And when Morgan shows that graph, I always think it looks like the state of Vermont, the way it comes down from highest spending to lowest spending. We're almost always right near the bottom of what we're spending per pupil. However, with the new weights, it's clear from that research that it costs more to educate the type of students that we're responsible for educating here. So our additional capacity here for having different opportunities for our students advantages us. There are other systems in the state who are going to be disadvantaged by weights, and at the same time are also going to be disadvantaged because the RPESR money is drying up. So they're going to have that double disadvantage where they have to figure out all of the positions. And I think it feels like a lot that we put into RPESR in terms of people, but I know that some of the other systems across the state invested a lot more in people. So they have a lot more positions out there they have to figure out what to do with. So my suspicion is we're going to see some staffing reductions in some of those other schools. So I'm hoping that's another way in which we'll be advantaged, is that the number of candidates in the pool, I'm hoping will be greater this year. So we'll be able to position ourselves in a better spot in terms of hiring season.
Great.
That is the hope.
Yeah.
And what I was sort of leading to when we were talking about the calendar, is that when we meet at the district level in December, we will be able to project out a tax rate, maybe not accurately, but as accurately as we're ever gonna be able to estimate in this process this year before we go to vote. So the number that you see in front of you is big, the assessment number going up is significant. That will come forward to your local budgets when we meet next week, or 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now. You just may wanna kind of think about these staffing changes at that big picture level rather than, oh my God, we need to cut because we need to cut, because we won't really know until we have those meetings what that impact is gonna be downstream in terms of the tax rate. And we may be in a position where the boards are saying we can't support that budget and cuts will have to come from somewhere. Or we may be in a position that says, this Act 173 really is benefiting us and we can go forward with this budget and maybe you're still giving your voters a little bit of a tax break.
Right.
After all that. We just, we won't know until the yield drops on December 1st.
On December 1st, okay. But that gives us plenty of time if we need to course correct.
Yeah, because you will have those discussions at both the NMD level and the ER level, and then we will meet again as this board after those two.
To finalize. Okay, great.
And again, we can punt to the first week in January if we need to.
We would just call a special meeting, yeah.
And I don't know, I'll have a better idea at that time if there's any significant revenue numbers that haven't come out yet. That, in my mind, that's the only thing that really warrants pushing it off.
Okay.
So we don't know how much money Michelle's getting in IDB, because that could be a $100,000 swing somewhere, we might wanna wait for that.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks, Morgan. Any other questions or any other things you wanna add, Morgan?
Nope, I think, stay tuned and we'll be back at it and probably robust discussion in December.
Thanks so much, it's a heavy lift, I know, really appreciate it. So Lynn, that brings us to you.
Okay. So I'll jump in, I'll start with personnel, this is all informational, this one. So you've been able to fill a PT position at Richford High School. Do you want me to go through and read all of these or just do an overview?
I think it's always great to hear the open positions.
Okay. So there's no action that's required for hiring or for resignation, although we have seen some shifts in both of those. We still have 2 open positions for speech and language pathologists. We're still looking for a therapeutic social worker, a behavior technician, paraeducators, and substitutes. We would love to see substitutes for teachers, nurses, paraeducators, custodians, and food service. That's what we have for open. So next up, I'm gonna just talk at a high level about the hiring process for the curriculum instruction and learning director position. So last year, we got a late notice that our curriculum director was moving on. We got that resignation sometime in June of last year, so it was far outside of the hiring season. So the decision was made at that time to hire interim people for the positions that we have. We're very fortunate to have both Leah and Gab serving as the co-interim directors for instruction and learning. At that time, the decision was made that we will go out to do a full search for this position because it's such an integral position so that we can have it during the hiring season. So I put together a draft and it was really, maybe you two share that. It's really a draft, so subject to some change. This is what a timeline could look like. So we agreed when we had this conversation last summer that we would advertise in December. And we would get the hiring process underway sometime in January. So I worked on this and this has not been proofed by the person who usually does my proofing, so I'm sure there are some changes that you'll see. But it begins by having Jamie do the advertising in the middle of December, right before the winter break. And then this would bring us to conclusion of the process on January 30th, where we would need to warn a special meeting. We can talk through dates, but I would love for you to take a look through the process. You'll see that it is mostly similar to what we've done in the past for principal searches. The one thing that is slightly different is we would not have the same level of forums for the community to come out to those forums that we would have. We would host a staff forum in this proposal. So the staff members could come out and meet the candidates and ask some questions. You would have a curriculum director screening committee that would take the first look at the candidates. They would decide what number of candidates that they would be interviewing, and then they would make a recommendation to me in terms of candidates that they want to bring forward to the board. That screening committee would meet a total of 3 times. They would do their interview on the 3rd meeting. They make their recommendation after that 3rd meeting. And then the board would meet and they would have at least 2 candidates brought forward to them. So we had a variety of models in FNESU for the director position. We have had people who have served a singular curriculum director for instruction and learning. And we've also had a co-director model. So when it came time to fill this position, we ended up going with co-directors for the interim position. So we positioned ourselves in this budget proposal to have the ability to make a decision to go either way. So we budgeted in case the board wants to go with a co-director model. We also have the ability to make a decision to go with a singular director.
Can you speak a little bit to the advantages of one versus the other, co versus a singular?
I think it is a huge job. I think that having someone that has the expertise from pre-kindergarten through high school and inclusive of CTEs is a big piece of that. There's also, thinking in terms of the curriculum content areas and having people that can kind of have different entry points and different experiences that make them the just right candidate for supporting certain, or the just right director for supporting certain parts of the work. There's also, one of the advantages we've certainly seen with Leah and Gab is that they both come with a variety of different skill sets. And, they have been able to use the skill sets that they have, kind of the gifts that they brought to the work. And they've each led holding a little bit different pieces of the puzzle. And they've been able to narrow their focus down on those small pieces of the puzzle. And it, I think, advanced the work pretty quickly in the few months that they've been on the job. So I think, the notion of having co-directors versus singular directors, I think it really has to do with who you have as a candidate too. So I think we should probably go into the process with our minds open to whether or not this model that we're looking for would be best served by one or by two candidates.
Makes sense.
So,
And you're looking for someone from the SU board to participate in early,
Yes.
obviously the board as in its entirety will do the finalist interviews.
there's a few things I'm looking for. The first is approval, am I on the right track timeline wise? Are people feeling okay timeline wise?
When you hired the position, is it, so you're hiring in January, but is it to start for the next?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
And do you feel as though, is it too early in January? Because folks who might not know, as far as when people would be signing contracts.
I think I don't really know, because we've done it both ways.
Yeah.
If we go much later than this, there will already be people who will be working to fill positions, but I've gone through processes in the past. Brittany and I had a conversation earlier, we've run a lot of search processes at this point, and there have been times where I thought, well, we wish we had more candidates, and then we've gone back, we've gotten to a point where we're like, if we don't have the right number of candidates, we've paused our timeline, pushed it back to school spring, reposted it.
Right.
Pushed our timeline back a few weeks, and then had a few more candidates show up. But I've also seen one of our searches ended up going into a February vacation, and we had no additional candidates. Once we got to that point, it felt like people were pretty locked in by that point. So there's a sweet spot that I try to hit, that's somewhere between that December, beginning late December into trying to finish before the February break.
Right.
I think is the sweet spot.
Yeah, makes sense.
So in addition to the timeline, I will be asking you to think about, would one of you be willing to serve on the screening committee? And then there are a couple other pieces for boards. Would a couple of you be willing to do a mini subcommittee to come up with some proposed final interview questions to bring back as a starting place for the board, when the board's planning for this work? And then the last piece has to do with helping me with some reference checks, and potentially if there's a candidate from outside of FNESU doing some site visits.
I'm happy to be on the screening committee and work in any kind of subcommittee too, and work with you, Lynn, on the reference check. And I've done a lot of the site visit stuff now, with Courtney kind of helping with facilitating those, so I can do that.
Is there anybody else that wants to participate in any of that?
Morgan said he's very upset his name was not indicated anywhere on that list.
You can take all of mine.
What's that?
As Morgan said, he's very disappointed that his name was not anywhere on this list, that they didn't.
He's really busy this time of year.
Happy to help as well, Lynn, especially with the board interview questions and some of those items that you need multiple people on.
reach out to Mary and plan through that piece. Are you okay with the timeline?
That's fine.
Alright,
And I think everyone should make a note of that January 30th, that we'll have a special meeting for interviewing.
if you could,
We'll need,
hold that for now as a tentative
okay,
placeholder. It lands on Tuesday, and Tuesdays are generally a little better for people, and that's in a week
Yeah.
where we don't have any other, board meetings that come up, so I think that's where it will land, but if we end up having to repost it, we'll be pushed back just a little bit,
okay, sounds good.
okay? Thanks. So I have one, topic for executive session, and then the last topic I have for open session is we built, as all of you know, a strategic plan for recruitment and retention of staff. And one of the strategies that we had developed in our strategic plan was exploring the idea of having a childcare center for FNESU employees that could be operated under, it would be under Melissa Wood's purview, so it would be, she's the early childhood director, so she would have a childcare program that would be separate from our preschool programs in our schools, but she could run a school year only childcare program, which would provide a local opportunity for our employees who sometimes really struggle to find childcare, and it also would be much more affordable than their current options because we would run it not for profit. We would run it, like I said, on the school year calendar, and that would be something that would reduce what they currently have to pay for childcare because in order for teachers to be able to hold their spot, they end up paying for childcare all through the summer. So we were approached recently by a property owner in the community who had a building for sale. And we had reached out to that property owner when we were looking for a place for our central office. So we brought this last night to the ER board for a conversation to see, because the FNESU board, we can't purchase property as an SU board. We brought it to the ER board to have a conversation about whether or not that board would be interested in purchasing property and exploring being the one that kind of held the property and then leased it to the SU board for us to be able to build that childcare center. So there was a conversation had at last night's board meeting, and there's a bond vote that we're gonna bring before the voters in November of 2024 for an expansion of Cold Hollow Career Center. So the idea, or the Enos from Richford board that landed last night was we have this building, the Monteith House, that used to be our staff's program. It's been a lot of things in the SU, it's in significant disrepair. And it really needs to be torn down, or it will require significant investment. So one of the things that the board talked about was if this board is interested in pursuing the strategy, that board would be interested in working with an architect to write that potentially into the building project proposal that goes to voters. So they could fund the building of the childcare center, which could have a dual purpose, because we have the Ed Rising Education and Social Service program at Cold Hollow, and they could use the childcare center for a piece of the training and work that they do with that Cold Hollow program. So what I'm asking this board to consider is that still a viable strategy that you would like us to continue to explore?
So, and just to clarify, the piece for the SU board is would we then lease the space that would be integrated into the reconstructed Monteith House, Cold Hollow building, okay.
And then operate the program.
And operate the program, which would generally, I mean, we hope, gonna be at cost.
Right. That would be the goal.
So it wouldn't necessarily be, kind of, financially kind of impactful as far as the SU budget goes.
I think you're going to, obviously you're going to have expense.
Right.
One of the things that we talked about at last night's meeting is we probably should go get some more data from our employees because the survey we did was a couple of years ago. And a lot of those people maybe don't need childcare anymore because the kids are probably school aged.
Right.
So we're going to do another survey to just try to get a sense of, Melissa, I see that you're on there, I had emailed Melissa about that today, or I think I put it in my designated last night, yeah. So just getting a sense of, would you still be interested in, if it was in school year 25-26 potentially? The other question that came up is, local community members are struggling to find childcare as well, so the wonder is, if we open this for our employees, how many of those spots in our local community would open up for other community members to be able to access? So if our staff no longer needs those spots, it could be beneficial for the greater community as well.
And it's always gonna be like a moving ship, you know what I mean? Like maybe those same people don't need it, but there's always gonna be people that need it, and like you said, the greater community, and then I just think it makes this district or this SU that much more desirable to attract people to come here.
Do you, would it be exclusively for SU employees?
That would be.
So it wouldn't operate outside of the school year, but obviously we need to continue leasing the space through the summer months, but we wouldn't be staffing it necessarily.
Correct.
Do you feel like it would be difficult to find staff who then
Well, I mean,
who would be out of work for summer months?
we still offer summer programming that I know that we struggle to hire for sometimes, so there would be the potential for them to pick up other work in the summer. I think it's no different than us hiring paraeducators. One of the significant benefits of us being able to do it is that those people working in that childcare program would also get health insurance benefits and dental and some of the other things that you get from working within a school system.
Yeah.
So that I think would be attractive for some people who might look at summer as an opportunity to supplement their income in another way. But I do think, to your point of, would we open it up outside of the SU, and I think we wouldn't, would be that, our first strategy going in, obviously we don't know what we will get until we're at that place, but the whole goal would be centering around the school calendar, so all of the school days, plus all of the in-service days. If we had a snow day, it wouldn't operate, it would be just like our school calendar. And I do think, JP's sister-in-law Wanda is opening up a new childcare center, up at the what do they call it?
It's the
Industrial
park.
park. So,
The new building that's going in there.
yeah, and I think she's gonna have 49 spots, 59 spots. Sorry, I had that wrong last night, 59 spots. And I think she's pretty firm on that number, and when Jimmy and I spoke, she gets people that call her all the time, and she just asks.
Is that an increase to her current
I
numbers?
think it's about 10 or so. She can't go beyond 59, at 60 she becomes a school.
And so even at 59, like all those spots are spoken for, there's
I send,
that much of a
I send
need.
every employee that reaches out to me that's on leave looking for childcare, I send them to her. And if she says no, she sends them somewhere else.
It might be helpful to get like a little more data from, and do some more surveys to just see, does that interest still exist? I mean, Kat's right, it's always in flux and at any given time, how many staff have children that they need care for, but then there's always new people coming in and new babies being born and so on and so forth, and it certainly would be another benefit that we can offer as far as attracting
And
for our hiring.
Yeah, and I would like to know, just roughly what are we looking at numbers wise, like how many children potentially, just a ballpark? And then how many staff does that entail?
It might be nice to know what would the potential, I mean, I know we're talking about a mythical building
Right.
in the moment, so it's hard to say what it would cost the SU to lease the space, to staff the space, and then how much of an interest among our staff is there. And so just to clarify from the Enosburg board, so, because Lynn, you said 25, 26, like this project
So-
might be done within
Well,
a year?
No, I'm saying it wouldn't be done before then. So the bond is in the fall of '24.
Okay,
So we're definitely not talking about investment for this next budget that we're talking about. The earliest we would be talking about is an investment in the 25-26 budget.
yeah,
Whether that's a September or if that's a January or April or I don't know. We're not far enough in the process to know, but I know when we're surveying, I wanna ask people about what their need would be beginning of the 25-26 school year. So we can pull together the data that we have, just know that it'll be only as good as the number of people who fill it out, but it just will get a sense of what kind of interest still exists for something like this, and then we have a little time because you're not having to budget anything as long as there's an interest. The Enosburg Richford board last night expressed an interest in having Morgan reach out to the architect just to have them spend a little time drawing that up to see, what would that add to the project.
and is this a tear down or this is a rebuilding of the structure? It's a tear down. And then be able, and would we expand, like with the bond and the work, looking at it, the architect would be hoping to expand the facility?
That'd be a separate building.
Oh, okay,
I wouldn't discount either, again, like whatever the capacity is, I wouldn't discount opening it up to the community. I would more approach it looking at that. Cause say you said, okay, we could take, and I'm just throwing numbers, but 20 kids, and then, starting in August, we only have 10 kids from the sending schools, that's 10 spots potentially available. And I mean, as a working mom, when I had my kids in daycare, but running a part-time business myself, I could deal with part-time daycare or even summers off, cause I had other help. So, there's always, people are so desperate, I feel like, for childcare, so if we have the ability, I feel like it's a win-win for the community and for the district to, get some revenue from that.
I strongly suspect we're gonna have more interest from our employees than what will be licensed staff spaces for, is what my guess is going to be. I'm not opposed either, as long as it isn't us turning away.
Yeah, just being kind of open to it, for sure.
So getting a sense of interest, children, and then Melissa starting to think about from that interest in survey, building a staffing structure around that for what that might look like.
well, and it seems as though, because it sounds as though like square footage matters for the number of student or children allowed in the facility, so trying to kind of connect with the architect when you all are doing your work on the building, so that if we want to try to anticipate what our need might be, that then the design follows the needs, so we can at least hopefully have a big enough space to come close to accommodating the need with our SU teachers.
I know Melissa has had this she's had it in her thought process for several years now, so I think she's probably already put a lot of thought into some of those factors, so we'll get working on it and we'll bring more information back.
And this, the bond, is it just for the town of, I know it's Enosburg, Richford, Ford, so this would be something absorbed by Enosburg, Richford taxpayers, not just the town of Enosburg?
Correct, it's part of the district.
Okay,
Because the Cold Hollow piece, well, any construction project, just like in Sheldon, Franklin, was absorbed by all, so
They combined, right?
yeah, the expansion project is really about Cold Hollow, but the connection to, because what we were talking about last night is it's a little bit silly to go purchase another plot of land somewhere in the community and have the expense of purchasing it.
Right,
When that district court already owns that land and there's already a property there that we need to figure out what to do with.
right,
So, and when we were looking at, Morgan had the map up, the footprint of that space was about the size of the footprint of the other space that we've been approached about.
gotcha.
So it was Mort's idea, I thought it was a pretty good one.
Yes, and that building has been needing attention for a really long time.
Demolition.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And what, do you get a sense from your communities as to the appetite for a bond?
Well, I think they want Cool Hollow fixed.
Yeah.
So I think that's the bottom line anyways.
Right,
So if we can add that onto there, it's just a bonus.
well, it's such a valuable resource for the
Yes.
community and
It
for
is.
our students.
Absolutely.
Great,
All right, we'll bring it back.
all right, perfect.
And then, I have one piece there, Courtney. I really need a board retreat. And we have struggled to get the survey results back. So I'm wondering if at the end of this meeting, can we be a captive audience and put hours out and decide what our board retreat is going to be?
Yeah, do you wanna do that at the end of the meeting?
Yeah.
We'll do that during board business.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And that's all for me.
Okay, super, thanks Lynn, I appreciate it. So we'll move on to our central office updates. Dominic,
Just had a couple of things. One, unfortunately, we're still trying to fill that Sheldon tech support specialist position. And in the meantime, Thomas is still working over there 2 days a week on the float, and well, 2 days a week plus as needed. He probably ends up there more like 3 or 4 days a week, but we're back and forth between the 2 locations. But we do have a couple of applicants that have come in recently, so we're hoping to get some interviews set up soon. We'll see where that leads us. And we're moving along with our transition to new websites for all of our schools. We actually had a training this morning on how to use their software and be able to edit the actual sites and adding pages. And we're aiming for at some point in January, going into the holidays, we're gonna slow things down a little bit. But we're making steady progress anyway.
So does each school, do they monitor and like put stuff up on their own websites, or does it all kind of go to you?
No, each school, and having the new sites will make that process much easier. And with the current sites, we're kind of all over the place.
Oh yeah, cause I was trying to find our handbook for Montgomery, and this was end of September, so maybe it's there now, but it was still the previous year, and we were like a month into the school year, and I'm like, where do I find the handbook? And everything, even, like I went to the SU website, but then like Montgomery, and then, it brings me to their website, and the links were just old or whatever.
Yeah, so there will be like Courtney, myself, and Thomas, we'll have, with everybody being under one umbrella, we will have the ability to push things out to all sites in one. Whenever we're posting info, we can choose a specific site or all sites for us, and then we'll have somebody at least one person at every school that can add content as well. So we'll have one, similar looking design as far as the structure and how the navigation looks, but everyone will still have the ability to, edit school colors, logos, content, change navigation menu items around a little bit if you have different pages that another school might not have. And another big plus is that this comes with smartphone apps as well. We'll have Android and Apple Store apps. And as we push content to the website, we'll go right to the apps as well.
And also social media, a lot of times I'll put something on our social media page and I'll ask schools to share it. But once we get the new website going, I just get one button and it goes to all of their Facebook pages, so that'll be super awesome.
So school calendars, menus, anything that's standardized across the systems, we'll be able to do.
Can I add something? Also, it will have the capacity to translate in any language that people need it in with a push of a button, so that'll be a bonus for us as well.
It's
Yeah.
actually even cooler than that on
The
the app.
translation, yeah, the translation actually works two ways. One, it'll auto detect the language you have selected on the device that you're using, so it'll automatically switch to whatever language your preference is, and then there'll also be a drop down so you can change it if you want it.
Amazing.
So, and I think that's all I've got.
Okay, thanks so much. Gab, Leah, do you have anything you'd like to add to your report?
I think we just wanted to add one thing about, Brian Rainville got some money. He got some grant money to, from Champlain Valley Educator Development Center, $1,200 I think. And he's gonna do some pretty interesting stuff with his drama department, so. He's got some kids that are interested in 9/11, and I think he's gonna try to use that money. It sounds like he's wavering on how he might use it, but it can be used for whatever, and they're considering going to New York City to see the 9/11 museum to support some of their work they've been doing, so that's pretty cool. Leah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else?
No, that was kind of the thing that's come in since we wrote the notes. I think that kind of covers it. And there's just some highlights around social emotional work that's been going on with Callie, and that's in the report.
Great, thank you. Michelle, anything you'd like to highlight from your board report?
Sure, still spending a lot of time in the STEPS program and super excited that we currently have 3 students that are transitioning back to their sending schools, and that's been going very well. And with that, we also have 3 new students that are kind of spreading them out, but the 2 students have started and we have a 3rd one coming next after Thanksgiving. With Leah and Gab, we had a team that also worked on, we're working on creating a FNESU MTSS framework, I guess we're calling it, that's still in a draft form, that's going to provide, hopefully provide some clarity to staff and families regarding what this multi-tiered system of support looks like, and our common agreements and common language and expectations. So we're still plugging away at that. And the only other thing I wanted to highlight is that I went to, it's called CDSEA, which is Champlain Valley Special Ed Administrators. And we watched a video on Netflix called, I hate the name of it, but it was called Crip Camp. And we're having large discussions, which is gonna involve Michelle Irish at our next meeting. But we're talking about where the intersection of special education and equity fall, and spent a great deal of time talking about that inclusion is not a location, and it's kind of how paraprofessionals became part of our world in 1974 when 504 became a thing. And so really talking about how to build community for all students, because just sitting in a location is not building community with kids, and how can we get other like more neurodiversity with helping support all kids to build community. So our next meeting is bringing equity directors to Champlain Valley with special ed directors, so we can kind of talk about that moving forward. So kind of direction we're going in, which made me feel really good about all of my programs, by the way.
Thanks, Michelle. Michelle Irish.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to add. So in the board report, I give you a sample of what's called the LAO report, or the LAO plan. This is our English learners sort of access plan. All right, getting a lot of feedback too, Leah. And so there's a copy of that we're gonna work through the rest of this year and then take some feedback on and make changes for it going forward, so feel free to take a look at it and ask me if you have questions. Two additions I wanted to kind of tip you to. One is Marty Valley is facilitating a course, this year that was developed by the Ed Justice Coalition. And it's using the, changes to the educational quality standards and about teaching, using, equitable practices in our classrooms. And we were worried we were gonna fill the class enough to hold it at 8 students. We have 20 people signed up. 5 of them are students from the Cold Hollow program that are gonna take it together with the adult program. So we're really excited about that. And then today, I happened to be lucky enough to attend a presentation at Enosburg Elementary by the Vermont Student Anti-Racism Network. They read a story to fourth graders and did a little activity, and they're doing this all around the state, so I was so excited to see some of our students participating. So there'll be more, I think, schools and grades that are gonna join in that effort, but it was really fun to watch these now college kids sort of teaching our younger kids about anti-racism and watching how they interact with that material. So I was really excited to see that.
Great, thanks so much, Michelle. Heather.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Our brochures have gone out. I will make sure, at least for the next board notes, to give you the brochures. They weren't ready when we were doing our board notes. So I'm not quite sure how registration numbers exactly looked, except that people are excited. And we were really pleased that some of our sites were able to increase their staffing again. So we're really building back, their capacities, and it's really wonderful. We decided in our coordinator meeting this afternoon to continue with summer in-service planning for staff, and we're gonna kind of start mapping out how we're going to help do some co-planning and stuff for summer programs to keep integrating the STEM and the math and the literacy. This feels really early to talk about summer, but we're planning already. I just found out with regards to the Vermont Youth Project, this is really exciting. So we have the council in Enosburg and Richford. Both councils have a pool of $2,300 for youth-designed, youth-led projects. On top of that, each of the councils will have an additional $14,000 for the youth to participate. It's a participatory budgeting process. They're gonna ask their peers for ideas of how to spend the money. Then as the council, they're gonna figure out how to actualize these projects, and then they get to spend $14,000. So that is wonderful.
How do the students get to be on the council?
There's both sites they have slightly different application processes. Because the Enosburg one is now in partnership with the Enosburg Village, there was a full application process, and seats were approved by the Enosburg Village trustees. The Richford program it's kind of application through LEAPS itself, so it's just an after-school club for them. We've got a small group of teens, middle and high school students. So yeah,
cool.
It's great. I can't wait to tell them about the more money that they get. So yeah,
Nice,
that's all I have.
that's great, thanks Heather, that's awesome. Jamie.
Okay, well, in the hiring world, we've hired 2 additional teachers and 3 support staff since the last meeting, but we've also lost a teacher that resigned and 2 support staff, so we kind of hire a couple, we lose a couple. But since I wrote this, we've actually hired 2 additional teachers that will be starting in January, so those names will go to the next month's boards. And then I'll be sending out open enrollment paperwork in the next couple of days. They have the month of December to sign up, and any of those changes go into effect January 1st. And as Morgan said, we have a couple other deadlines for the column movements and the retirements that'll be coming up December 1st as well. So that's really my updates.
Great, thank you. Dawn?
So I don't have a lot to update, I do wanna put in that this week is our week of our community meals that we do in all of our schools. Today, we did 3 of our schools, Richford Elementary, we served around 300 people. Montgomery Elementary, we served around 150 to 160, and Enosburg High School, we had approximately 35 adults come in. So at the middle high school level, to have some of the adults come in and join was really something different that we hadn't seen a lot of in the past. So that certainly is something that's stepping up. Pulling in more from the middle school area, that's where we're getting most of them from. But at the elementary level, it really is a big participation. A lot of them end up coming in. Tomorrow is Enosburg Elementary, Bakersfield, and Sheldon Elementary. And then on Friday will be Berkshire Elementary and Richford Middle School, High School. So all 5 communities will do the community meal. So.
And your slideshow was wonderful. They embedded in here, it was great to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of work and a lot of things that go on in the kitchens from day to day that a lot of people really just don't always know. And you aren't always aware of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are behind the scenes that, we end up, I've always been asked, why do you serve breakfast on a school day when it's a delayed opening, and it's because kids still they look forward to that. And so you still make that move, it just changes the times, but it still wants to be the same on the day.
There's kind of a false narrative about what school lunch looks like. And, when you watch a movie and they, for those of us in education, when you watch a movie in general about education, it never really feels good because of the way they portray it. But school lunches in particular get a bad rap. And when you look at that slideshow with Dawn, that's not just a special day, that's every day, that there's that kind of variety of fresh produce and whole foods that we're serving to kids. It really is, it's an excellent food service program.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you.
And I had the lunch today, it was really good.
I was just gonna say, I did too, and my husband is a cook, and he was like, this is so good. It was delicious.
Yeah, they do a good job with it. It's a lot of work, there's no doubt, but they do a good job with it. And we heard, I was at Richford Elementary today for theirs, and the amount of parents and everybody that came back into the kitchen like, wow, this was really good. We had a few of them, ask, we want the broccoli salad recipe because that's amazing. And when you think about it, a USDA recipe for food service, some people are like, yeah, no, thank you, but it really is, they do have some good things.
That was my favorite. And he said the same thing too. He's like, I've never had broccoli salad like this before. And I'm like, I haven't either, and it's so good.
Nice, that's awesome. Thanks, Dawn. Melissa.
Yes, first I'll apologize because my camera is being temperamental and choosing not to work. But I will give photo credit to my son when he's 4 for this lovely picture here. So one thing I wanted to just highlight in my board notes was that last week about coordinating Michelle Irish and other county early ed directors, as well as a representative from NCSS, to discuss and find supporting children first to 5 who are unhoused or housing. In my role, I focus a whole lot on our classroom programs with our 3 to 4-year-olds, and I provided some examples of the learning that takes place in those classrooms, but there's also a huge that takes place outside the classroom, and ensuring that we have wraparound for our children who are not in our programs. And that's one of the examples with, the collaboration with Michelle around the job.
I know she kicked out a little there, but
Yeah.
it had to do with, you were talking about unhoused youth in the beginning, correct? And connecting with the family infant toddler piece? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
Collaboration.
so Michelle's gonna be working with, I think that's for Franklin Grand Isle, correct?
Yes.
That's great.
It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Melissa. Gab, do you wanna do your flexible pathways?
Yeah.
Anything you wanna highlight from that board report?
I just wanna elaborate on the November 30th Fairbanks Museum exhibit that the kids did this month. At the beginning of the year, the FPA teachers took on they created 6 project-based units that all have an authentic audience and try to use the elements of project-based design, and this is the first one that has a truly authentic audience. So the kids they did some work in science and writing pieces and art, and that's all gonna be on exhibit at the Fairbanks Museum. And there's 6 of these units, so I just wanted to put out there that those units have been developed around the Portrait of a Learner. So they're kind of blazing the trail with that stuff. And there'll be some things for people to use. There's a better word for that, that's not coming to me today, so we're building some prototypes of how Portrait of a Learner can be implemented at the K-6 level. It's pretty cool. Lynn and I listened to a student-led conference tonight, and they're doing really good work with Portrait of a Learner, and it's making a big difference. The kids are more self-aware.
Nice.
You could hear that in not only the students' reflection, but also the parents' reflection about the changes over time that they've seen with the students' ability to be, in charge of their own learning.
Yeah, the level of independence is clearly different.
The one piece I just wanna say, I think model was the word you're looking for, that this program is creating kind of exemplar models that others could use, because the shifts around our Portrait of a Learner are pretty significant, and we're actually doing it from the bottom up in the FPA program. So from our kindergarten students through our really high school, all the way through in that FPA model, are using the Portrait of a Learner to guide what those learning opportunities are. And so the hope is that we can scale that up and be able to use some of the work in those 6 units to be able to share with other classroom teachers and kind of pilot projects moving forward, accurately reflected.
Nice, great, thank you. Vern?
Yep, so Sheldon Modular's up and running. I'm sick of talking about it, and I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing about it. So, I think we got all the bugs worked out of it. We've had a few little hiccups, but overall, I think it's operating well. So I'm pretty happy about that. Richford High School, I took a field trip about 3 weeks ago over to Grand Isle, and they currently have a pellet system that we've kind of changed our plan for Richford High. So Brad Novinsky is our consultant. He went over with me. We're looking at possibly doing a series of cascading boilers there that could potentially take us off fossil fuels pretty much completely there, which I'm really pretty stoked about. We're waiting for a heat loss for the building so we can look at what our best options for equipment there. We're not done either, because Berkshire's in need of some boilers desperately, and I know Morgan cringes every time I talk about it, but we've got to do something up there in the next year or two, so we're going to do something similar up there. So, and being able to have a footprint with no fossils is great. All the rebate checks are back from the lighting project. We did pretty well with that. I promised you guys that I will show you probably in 6 months where we're at as far as usage and savings there. The only one we weren't able to do, I wasn't able to get Enosburg High School, middle school under that time frame, only because I didn't think we were gonna have enough contractors to do it, and that's a monster school, so I was speaking to Morgan, I had an engineer go up there and give me what we're looking at for lights, and if we can purchase some before December 30th, we can still get the rebate money for that. And then kind of nip away at it, because it's gonna be a process to do that entire school. But I do wanna make sure we can, get the rebates on it. So other than that, we're up and running, no floods this week, so we're in pretty good shape.
Always a good thing.
Yes.
Thanks, Vern.
Yeah.
All right, any future agenda items that folks wanna?
Negotiations.
Right, so we will be doing negotiations with Lynn in December, so just wanna put that, plant that seed that we'll be doing that in executive session at the next SU meeting at the end of that. And in advance of it, I'll make sure to send out to everyone the review that the boards did that was in the spring. Was that?
No, it goes very quickly.
Gosh, does it ever, alright, so just keep an eye on your email for that. Our next meeting is December 20th, same place, same time. And with that, I think that I'll make a motion to enter executive session. All in favor? Aye. Great, so we'll excuse everyone except for, all right. Okay, so we're exiting executive session, the personnel discussion, and we have no motions pending. So with that, any other discussion tonight? Questions from the board? So I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Great, thank you all so much. Have a really lovely Thanksgiving holiday with your families. Yeah, absolutely.